Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I've got a special Theorycraft video for y'all. As always, chapters to each topic are listed down below. Back in January, I asked the best PvE players in all of Star Trek Online to design their dream ship, along with accessories if they desired. The intention being to put out there what players at this level want to see in the game, and to inform all of you that are chasing the meta what to keep an eye out for on ships as the year progresses. The participants for this Theorycraft are Cheops, Mara, Michi, Nick NB, and myself.
Little Miss Nick here.
Look, we had to be inclusive and include a Torp user. And don't worry, Nick is an Australian and would be offended if I didn't include some sort of joke while mentioning him. Jokes aside, this is pretty much the DPS dream team right now with who is currently active in the scene. These are the people that are actually going out, finding out what the new meta is, pushing it out to the wider player base, and are the ones setting records on the table. Starting with Nick's stream, as a torpedo fanatic, Nicholas wants more pilot command ships that can fully take advantage of the covert warhead module console from the Terran Eagle. This console allows commander pilot ships to have a shared recharge time for torpedoes of just half a second, a significant leap from the 1.5 seconds that you would see on any other ship in the game. With torpedoes at a high level also requiring a lieutenant commander command seat to run rank 3 of concentrate firepower, this console has made the Terran Eagle stand out as the only ship in the game with the setup needed to fully min-max torpedoes. As such, Nick's stream is for a pilot strike wing escort. Heading over to the stats he provided, he has a hull modifier of 1.35, a shield mod of 1. It's a 5-2 weapon setup with an experimental weapon slot, given it is a strike wing escort. And of course, this would have the ability to run dual heavy cannons if you wanted as well. 3 device slots, console-wise, 5 TAC, 3 Inch, 3 Psi. These Torp builds still generally use the consoles from your Fleet Spire, the exploiters and locators, so the TAC consoles are still preferred for this playstyle. A base turn rate of 14, impulse mod of 0.18, inertia of 60, so a decently maneuverable ship. Then for the power buffs, plus 10 to engines and aux. Remember, with torpedoes, weapon power doesn't matter, so these Torp builds and the mine builds will typically just dump all of their power into aux. Then there's a hangar bay, the pilot maneuvers, of course. For the mastery package, he wants the escort one. And for the bridge officer setup, this has a commander TAC, a commander universal with pilot, lieutenant commander science with command, ensign engineer, and ensign universal. So this does add up to a total of 13 bridge officer abilities, which is a valid configuration within the game. So the reason Nick went with this is the commander pilot again is needed to make that Terran Eagle console give the better shared recharge time for torpedoes. The command is needed at a lieutenant commander level, so you can do concentrate firepower 3, which is a significant improvement over the lower ranks of concentrate firepower. Now, the reason that Nick has the pilot on the universal rather than the TAC is because with the TAC, he would still like to be able to run a full suite of TAC abilities like your Torp spread, an attack Parent Omega if he wants, a mine pattern if he wants. He wants to be able to use that for TAC abilities. With the pilot being on the Commander Universal, there's not many pilot abilities he's actually going to use. Maybe Clean Getaway for Uncon, maybe Form Up in some situations. But he wants to be able to pretty much just run science abilities there, like a Gravel 3, and then still benefit from the pilot being there to get that boost from the console. The engineering seats are a bit low here. With the Torp setups, you only need emergency powered engines. There's no other engineering abilities really needed. And overall, this is a setup that would enable him to run quite a few Uncons, even though pilot and command are not the best specializations for Uncon. Heading over to the accessories, the first here is the Starship trait Entwined Kinetic Synergy. So this is basically just another ETM type trait, but specifically for torpedo and mine firing modes. So when you activate Torp Spread, it gives you a mine dispersal pattern beta of the equivalent rank. High Yield will give you a dispersal pattern alpha. When you activate dispersal pattern beta, that's going to give you a Torp Spread. And dispersal pattern alpha, a high yield of the equivalent rank. So for like trying to integrate a Torp and mine setup together, this would be a really beneficial trait for that playstyle. For the experimental weapon, he has the prototype Photon Hexa Launcher. Though he misspelled prototype. Terrible, Nicholas. That Australian education's a bit lacking there, isn't it? As is my autocorrect. But it does massive photon damage. It has a 45-degree targeting arc. Basically, Nick just wants a photon or quantum variant of the hexacannons that do a comparable amount of damage for Torp builds. I don't think that'll happen. I think the hexes were a bit of a one-off. Every other experimental weapon they've put in since has not been anywhere near to that level of performance. And truthfully, I just don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Now, for the other accessories, there is a console here. This is the Fleet Kinetic Focusing. This is basically the torpedo version of the Fleet Power Network Array that we got off of the Awani. So while active, this provides a scaling torpedo and mine haste buff based on your aux power at activation. And every 3 seconds while active, 60% chance for you to get a torpedo or mine firing mode, along with a reset of torp and mine cooldowns. So pretty straightforward. Again, a torpedo fleet power console essentially. And for the hanger pets, Nick just wants some pets that have some beams on them with fire at will, attack pattern beta 3, and the ability to mark concentrate firepower rank 3 on targets. Now, for everyone else, we're pretty much getting into the do side of things, directed energy weapons, so you're going to see a lot of very similar elements as we move through everyone else's stream setups. For Michi here, he initially described it as an Atlantis with a hangar bay. So heading over to the stats he has here, a hull and shield mod of 1.15, a 5-2 weapon setup plus an experimental weapon. The experimental weapon slots are really valuable right now because the hexacannons are just such good performers if you know how to keep your ship pointed at a target. 3 device slots, console-wise, 5 tac, 2 inch, 4 psi. A brace turn rate of 15, impulse of 0.23, inertia of 60. For the power buffs, 15 to weapons, 5 to auxiliary. Of course, it has a hangar bay for type 7s. Being a temporal ship, it does have the molecular reconstruction ship mechanic, and he wants a destroyer mastery package on it. For the bridge officer setup, commander tac with temporal operative, a lieutenant commander psi, lieutenant commander universal with intel, lieutenant universal, and ensign universal. So if you guys are familiar with the uncon meta, this is just a very, very uncon friendly setup. And heading over to Michi's accessories. So for the console, this is adaptive temporal armament. Passive on this is plus 20 accuracy, and the active is inspired by the Ilios console, so there's a different effect based on what console slot you put this into. When you put it into attack slot, it has the temporal dual heavy cannon ability. This console will act like a phaser dual heavy cannon for 20 seconds and will work with firing modes. While in an engineering slot, it's going to give you the temporal beam array. This will act like a phaser beam array for 20 seconds, works with firing modes. While in a science slot, you get the temporal bubble ability. This is a minus 50 damage resistance debuff to up to 10 enemies in a 3 kilometer area of effect around the main target for 20 seconds. And while in a universal slot, Temporal Nuke fires Temporal Warhead at foe, which has a 3 kilometer area of effect and will knock shields offline for 5 seconds, scaling with your Drain X skill. And the Starship trait here is Dimensional Overclock. Per use of different types of unconventional systems triggers, so control abilities, gain 1 stack for 30 seconds with a max of 7 stacks. Each stack provides 10% Cat 1 stacking all damage, and 15% stacking flight speed and turn rate. New stacks will then refresh duration of all existing stacks. So this is a trait that would synergize very well with an uncon setup where you have a bunch of control abilities on your setup. This would be up to 70% Cat 1 all damage and 105% flight speed and turn rate buff. And next up, we have Mara's Dream Ship. Surprisingly, it's another Temporal Strikewing Escort. It's like the Temp Intel specialization combo is just really good right now. Who would have thought? So Mara did also explicitly say required rank Queen here. Gotta love that. So for the hull and shield mod, 1.3 hull mod, 0.9 shield mod. It's another 5-2 weapon setup with the ability to run dual heavy cannons, and again, an experimental weapon slot for the hexacannons. 2 device slots, the console setup. Honestly, it doesn't matter with these uncon setups now that we're doing on the mere angle and that we would do on a ship like this. Every slot that we have is just a universal console, so it really doesn't matter so long as we have the correct number of console slots. Base turn rate of 15, impulse mod of 0.19, inertia of 60. For the power buffs, 10 to weapons and 10 to auxiliary. A hangar bay, of course, for type 7s. The molecular reconstruction ship mechanic, given it is a temporal ship. And the Strikewing Escort Mastery Package. For the Bridge Officer setup, this one is a little bit different. So there's a Commander Universal with Temporal Operative, a Lieutenant Commander Engineer with Intel, a Lieutenant Commander Universal, Lieutenant Universal, and Ensign Universal. So it's a bit more flexible with the Bridge Officer setup. But again, this would be a very unconventional systems friendly setup for someone going down that playstyle. And heading over to Mara's Dream Accessories, the console is Inertial Capacitor. So this is a toggle, and while active, moving at full throttle applies 1 stack of inertia per 0.5 seconds. Each stack of inertia is a minus 10% Cat 2 bonus all weapons damage debuff on you, and you can have a maximum of 20 stacks. When throttle is set to 0, all stacks of inertia are immediately converted into stacks of release. Release is 5% all weapons haste per stack. Stacks are clear the next time you hit full throttle, and deactivating the toggle causes stacks to decay. The idea with this trait is that you would build up stacks during the downtime you have in a run while transitioning to the next target in the run, and then when you get there in park, that damage penalty is then immediately converted into a haste buff. So this console would reward what we view as the meta optimal way to fly a ship, where you often just park and sit still with your target in front of you. And the Starship trait is Forward Observers, so this enhances your fighter squadrons by equipping them with additional sensor packages that reveal vulnerabilities on the target. Pet attacks on targets generate stacks of reconnaissance, up to 10 stacks. Each stack grants an additional 7.5% crit severity against that target for yourself. So your pets hit the target and debuff it essentially, and when you hit the target, you're then getting extra crit severity against that target. So that'd be interesting and would bring a bit more value to having hanger pets on builds. And next up, we have Cheops Stream, and he wants another Miracle Worker Intel Juggernaut. So with Cheops, he's a big fan of Hive, and he likes to just go straight down the center of Hive, either solo or in a supported environment where there isn't really a need for Uncon. So for the required rank, Cheops explicitly said 3 million solo. That's his required rank for this ship. For the hull mod 1.1, a shield mod of 1, it's a 5-3 weapon setup. It has a Juggernaut array, and he insists it is one that does instant damage, no charge time, and that it does plasma damage, which makes sense. The Juggernaut arrays that have a charge up time, like the Strike one, for instance, they're not good. If it's not doing instant damage like the World Razor or the VOD Jugg, it's not going to be a good Juggernaut array. 4 device slots console-wise, 5 Eng, 2 Psi, 4 TAC, so he would be looking to do a bunch of isomags for the type of runs he's doing. Base turn rate of 10, impulse of 0.2, inertia of 65, plus 10 to weapons, engines, and aux power. And he wants a hangar bay, which I don't think is realistic for a Juggernaut, but this is his dream ship. He initially also wanted an experimental weapon, but I was like, bro, got to keep it somewhat realistic. And then there's the Juggernaut Mastery Package. For the Bridge Officer layout, Commander Universal with Miracle Worker, Lieutenant Commander Universal with Intel, Lieutenant Commander Psi, Lieutenant Engineer, and an Ensign Universal. So this is Cheops Stream again for plowing right through the middle of Hive on Advanced and Elite difficulty. Heading over to his accessories, the console is Taste of Armageddon. Passives on this are 25 Shield Pen and 40 Armor Pen. The clicky is for 25 seconds plus 25% Cat 2 bonus weapon damage within forward 90-degree arc, and plus 100% bonus damage with the Juggernaut array. And the Starship trait is Shall We Die Together. Upon reaching either 50 critical hits or 50% health, it will summon in 2 identical Juggernauts, port and starboard, that warp in and immediately unleash their own Juggernaut arrays, equal to that of the Captain's Juggernaut array, on all enemies within 90 degrees of your forward arc before warping out again. And that can go off once every 60 seconds. So again, Cheops really likes going right down the middle of Hive, and he wants to make sure he's getting a ton from that Juggernaut array, and having some additional ships warp in to do even more Juggernaut arrays, that would make Cheops very happy. And now on to my dream ship. So as you guys know, about a year ago, I actually did a video going over the ultimate energy weapon platform. Back at that time, this was pre-Fleet Power Network Array. And the ship that I did there, that ship would still be really good for a supported environment. It was Miracle Worker Intel. But with how the meta has evolved and how we're now doing the heavy uncon focus with these Strike Wing Escorts, this wouldn't be ideal for your day-to-day random pug type environment. So adjusting my standards to what the current meta is, I would want a Temporal or Intel Strike Wing Warbird. Now, I know most people are going to go for just standard escorts, But I'm a big fan of the Romulan ships. I like the functionality with the Singularity cores. Warp Shadow's a really cool ability, and I would want to have another Romulan ship. Basically, a better Delkina for the current meta. So for the stats here, a hull modifier of 1.4, and in exchange, it has a really low shield mod at 0.7. For the weapons, 5.4 to aft, and of course an experimental weapon slot for the Hexa cannons. 3 device slots. For the consoles, again, just like with Mara's build, it really doesn't matter. I'd be running a full set of universal consoles on this, so whatever console configuration you want. For the base turn rate, 15, impulse mod of 0.2, inertia of 65. For the power buffs, plus 10 to weapons and plus 10 to auxiliary. 1 hangar bay. I'd want to have a Romulan battle cloak and then the Strikewing Warbird Mastery package. And heading over to the bridge officer setup, I would have a commander tac and then a commander universal, and that could have temp or intel on it. And then a lieutenant commander engineer, which has the opposite of whatever specialization the primary has. And then an ensign science and ensign universal. These dual commander setups, we know that they're possible. We just got the new Breen lockbox ship, which has 2 commander universals. Now, that Breen ship does lose out on a 13th bridge officer ability because it's got the 2 commander universals. But with this having a fixed tack on one of the commanders, that secondary side effect should not be a thing here. So I should have access to the full suite of 13 bridge officer abilities. Now, for the temp and intel, that is just a really important specialization combo with the current meta. That is the best for maximizing the amount of uncon procs on a ship, and it really doesn't matter to me which is in the commander, which is in the lieutenant commander, but you do really want to have both of those on a ship. And heading over to my accessories, the one that I do not have listed here is just a plasma version of the Hexa cannons. That would be really wonderful. For the console, this is Relay Overload. The passive on this is 100% power transfer rate, and the clicky has a 0-second activation time. I wish that is something that the devs would do for pretty much every console in the game. The really long activation times, like the Credence console, are just really brutal to deal with. But anyways, this has 0-second activation time, and it's up for 20 seconds. While it's active, your weapon power cost is disabled, so your weapons won't drain any power. You will have immunity to subsystem offline effects. You will get 50 weapons power and plus 30 max weapons power. So this is a console that would be very beneficial for especially these really high uncon builds that have dropped their isomags. This would be a way to get some of that extra power back. The weapon power cost, being disabled there, would also be very beneficial. And the immunity to subsystem offline effects would be very, very handy. Now, I know someone's going to say, that's pretty powerful. Well, I just based this console off of the lithium transporter, which already exists in the game, and it does most of these things already. So basically just an alternative to that console that has some different effects. And for the Starship trait, this is improved OSS, override subsystem safeties. So while this is slotted, it will modify OSS to not diminish the power buff over time. The power buff from OSS will remain at the full value for the ability duration. OSS will not disable a random subsystem upon it finishing giving you the power buff, and the duplicate cooldown for OSS is lowered from 45 seconds to 30 seconds. This trait would be trading the trade-offs that you're dealing with OSS. So without this trait, you're going to have to deal with the power diminishing over time, the random subsystem disable at the end, and the longer cooldown. And if you're on this trait, you're addressing those issues, but in exchange, you're eating up one of your highly desired Starship trait slots. So I feel like that is a worthy trade-off that quite a few people would consider going for. So for the theory crafting, that is all I've got for you guys today, but there's probably a couple of themes that you guys picked up on here. For the torpedo side of things, they clearly need to put some more commander, pilot, lieutenant commander command ships into the game. Either that, or they need to adjust the requirements on the covert warhead module so that you're able to get that half-second shared recharge time on a few more ships, because it does suck that console can only be properly utilized on the Terran Eagle, and as such, the torp meta at a high level is locked to just one ship. And for the other ships I went over here, pretty much everyone was a Strikewing Escort other than Cheops. And that's because right now, for doing this uncon stuff where we're going in solo or in pug environments, having a hangar bay with type 7s is extremely valuable. and having the temp intel or intel temp spec combos there, that's just really highly desired for the uncon potential that offers you on your build. So I know that's not a play style for everyone, but when it comes to the meta, outside of a supported environment, which is what Cheops build was for, in that pug or solo environment, temp intel temp is the dominant specialization combo right now. And for ships that we get with that spec combo, you really want to see a hanger bay on them as well, so you can do type 7s. So hopefully you guys found this entertaining and perhaps a bit useful to understand, what to look for from ships this year. Some of your other specialization combos like Command Intel are still perfectly viable, but right now, Temp Intel, Intel Temp, Commander Pilot, Lieutenant Commander Command, those three setups are really what we want to keep an eye out for this year. And that is going to be it for today. Now, enjoy this little bit from Nick reacting to the bit at the intro. Just be warned, Nick is Australian, so there may be some strong language.
As I was sitting, I'm watching Discovery, and I'm sitting going, I listened to your thing, and I liked that. That was pretty funny. I was trying to like, I've got some good records, and I don't think I've ever been. I know I was number one ISE for like 5 minutes. Okay,
Hey, I knew you would get a kick out of that.
I did. I had a laugh. It was fucking good.
Yeah,
But
Michi
yeah,
immediately knew what I was doing with that.
uh, that was terrible, but nah, it was good. That was good.
And as always, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.